Hello, it's Sue here from Juberry Fabrics and Designs. The following video has some instructions on how to put together this lovely tote bag. We've called it the Easy Peasy Quilt As You Go tote bag, and it is quite a simple project to undertake. As long as you can use a sewing machine with a straight stitch, you're well away. I have made another set of instructions on the video which can be found on the Juberry website. These instructions show how to mark out the pattern onto your wadding for the Quilt As You Go technique. These instructions are also included in the pattern. The following video doesn't show the marking out process. Good luck, and I hope you find the following instructions really useful. So, now to get on with the sewing, stitch and flip method, Quilt As You Go. So first of all, you will see that you are looking at the back of my piece of fabric with the pattern on. This is the calico side, and I have stitched all the way around the outer circumference of my marked pattern. I've used a dark thread so that it shows up against this light calico, and there's a reason for this, as you will see when we get to the next stages of constructing and cutting out this bag. So I'm just going to flip it over back to the front again. There we go. Just make sure you can see it all. Yep, you can see it all. So this is where we start auditioning our fabrics to see where we want to go, what to go where. First of all, I'm going to start somewhere around about here. I'm laying my fabric over the top of this channel that I've marked on. Now I've cut my strips of fabric at 2.5 inches in width. Our channels are 2 inches. So this first piece of fabric is going to overlap the blue lines, or the marked pattern lines, by 1/4 inch on each side. At this stage, you can pin it down, just so as you know it's all going to stay nicely in place. Now, the other thing to consider when you're doing this is to make sure that your piece of fabric is actually totally covering the piece you want it to cover. You see it's overlapping here and it's overlapping off the edge. That's exactly how we want it to be. So now I'm going to audition my second piece of fabric that I want to put in. Now I'm going to use, I think I'll use this one. Now I'm auditioning it up to the next channel. As you can see, it does cover that 4 inch line there. It also covers, I don't know if you can see, this line here. So that's in the ideal position. So I auditioned it. Now I'm just going to flip it right over where it is. Lie it on top of this. At this stage, you can pin this in place, or if you're like me, you can just wing it and go for it. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew using a 1/4 inch seam all the way down here. Doesn't matter if you sew into other marked pieces at all, because we're going to cover that up at the end of the day. Doesn't matter if you sew off either, because we'll cut it all out at the end, so don't worry about that. Right, I'll be back in a minute. So I've sewn my piece of fabric on using a 1/4 inch seam. And you can see my stitching line bits along there, and I flipped it over and given it a good press so it covers that next channel. So now I'm going to audition the next piece of fabric. I think I'll use this nice butterfly mauvey pinky one. So let's just make sure it fits and it will cover that channel. Yes, it will. So I'm just going to flip it over in that position, and again you can pin it if you like, but I'm going to wing it. I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to do the same again, and I'm going to keep repeating that all this side, and then I'm going to continue doing it this until I've literally covered all this central section, with the exception of these 4 inch ends. Now don't worry at this stage if your piece of fabric is going to cover these boxing areas, but that's fine. Sew over it, because we're going to cut it off at the end of the day and it won't matter. So I'll be back when I've covered this whole fabric. And the other thing, think about it is don't concern yourself too much if you go a bit skew-if and you're not quite within these channels, you know, it's not quite right. You can see a bit of blue or it looks a bit uneven. It really doesn't matter. So long as you keep with this angle, if it's slightly skew-if, it's not going to matter. No one's going to notice about it. And when you finish this bag, it's going to be lovely. And nobody's going to say, oh, I think you've got a 48-degree angle going on there, because it's not going to matter. Whether it's 48 or 45, nobody's going to notice. Okay, so now we've got to the stage where we have sewn all of our 45-degree angle 2.5-inch strips across the central portion of our tote bag. Don't worry when you're sewing over the edges and the outline, it won't matter, because look, this is the cutting line on the back. We can do it from the back when we're finished. So the next stage is to put on our tops of our bags, which are our 4-inch pieces that we left at the top. Now, if you can see, I've just remarked my 4-inch line because I've sewn over the original line. Can't be helped, so it's not a problem. So just pop your ruler on the outside edge, measure 4 inches, friction pen, Frisian pen, heat removal pen, whatever you fancy, make a mark all the way down there and you know where your 4 inches in. Do the same on the other end. Now for the top of our bag. You will have saved one piece of your fabric, which if you bought the fabric bundle for these bags, you will need to reserve one for the top of the bag. You need a 4.5-inch piece, half the width of fabric for each side. So I've chosen the dark purple, and all I'm going to do is right size facing, I'm going to place my bag top against the 4-inch line I've just remarked. And then I'm going to stitch a nice 1/4 inch seam all the way down there and flip it over and press it. I'll do the same to the other side. I'll be back when I've done that. Right, I'm back. I have now done the stitching and flipped my tops of my bags back over, giving them a good press. And then what I've done is I've just top stitched in a contrast, well, sorry, it's a matching purple thread, just on the top line here. And then what I did, I smoothed this all back, put a few pins in it, and then I sewed it on the reverse. I'll flip it over. So, see the stitching lines that we previously had? I just have sewn back over those. And that's just secured this top bag part in place. Right, so now we are going to trim our bag. So flip it over so as your calico is actually showing. Let's give it a good old smooth out to make sure we've got none of these pieces of fabric flip back up on themselves. I'll just test that on the other way as well. And now I'm going to actually cut the thing out. Now this is where the genius of having a dark stitching line around the outside circumference of your pattern that we did right at the beginning of this tutorial is so great, because now we can actually see where we got to trim. If we try to trim from the front, I'll just flip it back over. You can see we're going to be a bit stuffed because we can't see our lines. We've sewn over them. So we'll do it from the back. I'll just trim this out now using 1/4 inch from the stitching line. So I'm doing this a bit. I'll start the top bit. You can see what I'm doing. I'm just lining my ruler up with that stitching line, and I'm going to do 1/4 inch the other side all the way down. So I'm going to do this and then I'll come back to you when I've finished. So I've cut all my pattern out now, the finished piece. Well, the finished piece of the piecing anyway. We have still got to sew the sides together and make it into a bag. But I've cut out just 1/4 inch the other side of the sewn black line. Now with the boxed in pieces, what I did here, I literally just cut as close to the black line as I could, just so as the pieces are still more or less sewn together. So let's flip it over and you can see what your piece looks like. Starting to look a lot better now, isn't it? Certainly looks more like a good old bag piece rather than a load of bits of fabric thrown together. So now is the time to cut your lining. So choose a piece of fabric that's going to complement what you've sewn with this material and use this as a pattern. Cut it out. I'll come back to you now with the next demonstration, which will be about the handles and putting the whole bag together. So now we're going to do the handles. We've cut out the pieces of fabric as per the pattern, and I have made some in stages, as you can see here. So if we look at the furthest away one, this is the one here, my fabric strip has been folded over a piece of wadding that's already cut. Then what I've done, a second piece of fabric has been cut and I have folded over and pressed a 1/4 inch seam up into it. Then I've laid this one on top of that one, like so. And I have sewn along the edge of the lighter colour fabric all the way down. Do that for both handles and you're sorted. Now, just a bit of a clue. It isn't easy to press over a small 1/4 inch seam. But if you spray your fabric with a bit of spray starch while you're doing it, it's easy peasy. So once you've finished sewing both handles, you then want to put them together and make sure they're both the same size, the same length before you attach them to your bag. So mine are going to be cut at 30 inches. I'll see you back in a minute when I have finished sewing of the handles and we'll get on to constructing the bag together.